What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 3. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my quarterback stud is Jalen Hurts from the Philadelphia Eagles, playing the Washington Commanders, who have the 4th worst defense overall. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts has averaged 30.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 14 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 8% owned, projected at 23.4 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary, 500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 6.5. So Jalen Hurts has scored 37 and 25 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks off of 11 and 17 rush attempts. He's got a fantastic matchup here in week 3. So I like Jalen Hurts here versus the Washington Commanders. Okay, my sleeper pick for week 3 is Jared Goff from the Detroit Lions, playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Jared Goff has averaged 21.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2 rush attempts per game. Only going to be about 4% owned, projected at 16.9 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 5,800 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 52.5 points scored in this game, with the Lions trailing by 6. So Jared Goff scored 26 and 17 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, got 2 rush attempts in each of those games. I think he can put up another 20-plus fantasy points here versus the Vikings. I like that Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, and with the Lions expected to be trailing in this game, Jared Goff could get a lot of pass attempts to rack up those fantasy points. So I like Jared Goff here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So my running back stud is Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals, playing the New York Jets, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Joe Mixon has averaged 16.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 23 rush attempts per game and 6.5 pass targets per game. So a ton of volume. He's on the field for 74% of the snaps, going to be about 13% owned, projected at 18 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, with the Bengals favored by 6. So Joe Mixon has scored 11 and 22 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 19 and 27 rush attempts on top of 4 and 9 pass targets. So he's got a fantastic matchup, just a ton of volume, averaging, 12 23, almost 30 touches a game. So I like Joe Mixon here versus the New York Jets.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, my sleeper pick at the running back position is Darrell Henderson Jr. from the LA Rams playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have the worst defense overall. They give up the third most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Darrell Henderson Jr. has averaged 11.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.5 rush attempts per game and 2.5 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 70% of the snaps, only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 11.4 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 5,700 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 3.5. So relatively high scoring game here, close competitive game. Now, Darrell Henderson Jr. hasn't got a ton of volume so far, but I think he's going to be involved in this one. I think there's going to be plenty of rush attempts here. He's got a fantastic matchup. So I like Darrell Henderson Jr. here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So my wide receiver stud, this was a close call here. I think I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Detroit Lions, who have the second worst defense overall. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Justin Jefferson has averaged 26.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.5 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 95% of the snaps, gonna be about 9% owned, projected at 25.5 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 9,300 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 52.5 points scored in this game, with the Vikings favored by 6. So Justin Jefferson has scored 11 and 42 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 12 and 11 pass targets. He's got a great matchup in a high-scoring game. So I like Justin Jefferson here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, my sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
And Tyler Lockett has averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 86% of the snaps, gonna be about 3% owned, projected at 12.8 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 5,800 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 1. Tyler Lockett scored 23 and 6 fantasy points in the last 2 games, off of 11 and 4 pass targets. He's got a great matchup here versus the Falcons. I like that he got 11 pass targets last game. His price is still low, ownership way too low, so I like Tyler Lockett here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My tight end stud is Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs, playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 76% of the snaps, going to be about 6% owned, projected at 18 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 7,900 DraftKings salary, 100 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 5.5. Now, Travis Kelce has scored 10 and 29 fantasy points in the last 2 games, up of 7 and 9 pass targets. He's got a good matchup, a good tight end matchup here versus the Colts in a high-scoring game. This game is expected to be within a touchdown, so relatively close and competitive. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, my tight end sleeper pick. I'm just surprised with the low ownership on this player for this week. I like Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders, playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends. But Darren Waller has averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game, but on the field for 69% of the snaps. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 12.9 fantasy points here in week 3, and he's only 5,800 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 2. So Darren Waller scored 17 and 12 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, off of 8 and 6 pass targets. So I know Devontae Adams is eating up a lot of those pass targets, but Darren Waller's still averaging 7 pass targets per game. 14.5 fantasy points per game is pretty good. To only have 2% ownership at only 5,800 DraftKings salary, I think he's going to go under-owned here, and he's got 20 plus fantasy point upside. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Tennessee Titans.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.